Good afternoon. My name is Danny Plogger, and I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Transit Association. I want to welcome everybody to our fifth 2024 VTA and DRPT Joint Lunch and Learn webinar program. VTA is so thankful for this partnership and the opportunity to offer our members in the Commonwealth's transit community a deeper dive into public transportation's challenges, issues, processes, and opportunities with insight from experts at DRPT and our transit partners. This webinar series would not be possible without the support, partnership, and expertise of DRPT. As a reminder, our former programs are on VTA's YouTube page if you'd like to go back and review them. And as always, if you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the Q&A box and I'll ask them at the appropriate time. Today's program is Connecting the Commonwealth with Remix, a unique opportunity to learn about the partnership between VIA and DRPT, which gives every transit agency in Virginia access to the Remix software, which is one of the most comprehensive transportation planning and scheduling softwares, allowing our transit agencies to visualize and solve their community's biggest mobility challenges. This afternoon, I have the pleasure of introducing our partners in this webinar series and today's presenters. Tiffany from DRPT, along with Josh and Sev from VIA Remix. Tiffany is Director of Transit Planning at the Department of Rail and Public Transportation, and she has over 15 years experience in transportation planning, having previously served as the statewide transit planning manager and statewide transit planner at DRPT, a principal and senior transportation planner at the Richmond Regional Planning District, regional planner at the Northern Shenandoah Valley Regional Commission, and she has a Master's of Urban and Regional Planning from Virginia Commonwealth University, go Rams go, and an undergraduate degree in public administration from James Madison University. Josh leads Remix's enablement team, where he supports transit agencies in implementing cutting-edge technology to plan, optimize, and manage their transportation networks. Josh has been with VIA for 4 years and previously worked in research and analysis for both the public and private sectors. He holds a BA and a double major in government and history with a research focus on urbanism from Franklin and Marshall College. Sev is a partnership director at VIA, where she manages a number of VIA's partnerships across Canada and the Eastern United States. She helps partners understand system data trends and addresses key operational and growth challenges. She holds a BA from McGill University, Canada, and an MA in International Development from Columbia University School of International Public Affairs. So please grab your lunch, sit back, and enjoy a great program from our friends Tiffany, Sev, and Josh. Tiffany, kicking it over to you.
Thank you so much, Danny. And thank you to everyone for taking time out of your Friday lunch hour to join us to talk about Remix. So this is going to be a focus a little bit reminding everyone about our state contract that we have with Remix and our goals of having this access for all of our transit agencies. But then also I'm going to do my best to kind of give you the high level overview of Remix. Depending on our timing, we may also have some time to be able to do sort of a live demonstration, but I promise at the end of this presentation, there'll be available resources and opportunities for you all to explore Remix and figure out how it best will be used for your kind of systems in terms of planning and operations and scheduling. So let me go ahead and first, Danny already did a great job to introduce our Remix contacts, but I wanted to make sure there are phases to names. For a number of you that have already been using our state contract, we have had new contacts come in when we had just renewed our Remix contract. So I want to make sure that you knew about Josh and Sev. Some of you who have also been involved in some of the microtransit deployments may also recognize Josh from the last couple of years. So I'm glad to have him engaged again with Virginia. And Sev is going to be an excellent partner as we continue exploring our relationships and also being able to get some better best practices relying on her experience with other clients. So I just want to make sure that you all knew who they were and also knew who to bug if you can't get in touch with someone at DRPT. So I wanted to kind of remind everyone again, we have a state contract that provides all of our transit agencies with access to Remix. We launched this back in July 2023, and then we have just done the renewal for another year. This access currently includes 2 modules under Remix. One is the Remix Transit module, which is focusing on fixed route planning. And then there's also the Remix On Demand, which will also allow you to do any kind of on-demand microtransit planning. I say this because it's very important to really understand that in addition to thinking about how your current service runs, whether you're doing fixed route, demand response, or if you are starting to explore more in some mobility options and microtransit. Remix is a really great platform to explore that, especially if you're not quite ready to commit to a feasibility study or consultant work to look at that. It gives our transit agencies those resources to start exploring that first on. And as a reminder, this is only available to our transit agencies, but we have also allowed consultants that are working on projects on behalf of an agency. So if you're working on transit development plans, transit strategic plans, the commuter assistance program strategic plans, those type of elements, this is also something that's available to be able to help in terms of that development of your plans. Part of why I'm also doing this is just to kind of remind people that we are trying to see how active you are in terms of using Remix. Both us at DRPT as well as our transit agencies, we're trying to encourage our agencies to use this and kind of figure out what are your best use cases, how are you using this, and the number of users. And so I asked our Remix contacts to put together this initial data for us to kind of think about how we've seen the growth. When we started this back in July 2023, there was only a handful of agencies that already had some existing experience or contracts with Remix. But since we launched this, we've seen 177 new users across 31 different agencies. So that is an astronomical growth if I see that. We've seen a little over 2,000 hours in Remix spent by users, and just in the last 6 months, 891 hours. So I know a lot of you are actively using this, and the chart above kind of shows you kind of the active transit projects that we've seen from our Virginia users. So that at the most, we've seen just in the last third quarter, 295 projects. I haven't had a chance to really dig into what those projects may be, but it's really encouraging to see you all just developing these new projects and kind of seeing how how Remix is useful to you in that regard. I also wanted to emphasize, because I think that in discussions with a lot of our transit agencies, they've assumed that Remix has been for those large urbans. Those already has large staff that have technicians that are familiar with Remix. And so I asked them to kind of pull as well, kind of the top agencies that we're seeing use Remix. And I wanted to emphasize that they're not just like large urbans, but they're also spread throughout the whole state. So you have Hampton Roads Transit and WADA, GLTC, CAT, Fairfax County, Dash, OmniRide, Loudoun County, GRTC, Valley Metro. But I also know that through my engagement, I've also seen some of our Southwest Virginia providers explore Remix, and as well as some of our smaller providers that may have not always had access to some planning and scheduling software. So I'm very encouraged by the fact that regardless of your skill set or familiarity with Remix, that we've seen people in our agencies add new users and just get in and play around with the Remix platform itself. So that being said, what is Remix? We keep talking about Remix. I'll say Remix Via. At its core, we just want to emphasize that it's a planning platform for public transportation. It's meant to be able to help you design, also look at evaluating how your current system looks, and also a collaboration piece, which I'll talk about a little bit more as we get into this presentation. Allows you to explore everything from doing small detours and changes to even updating your timetables, even to a full system redesign, and then anything that you want to explore in between. But really, what I find the most use out of this is that in addition to being able to analyze data, and there's a number of different data sources already available through Remix, it also allows you to add your data sources in there to be able to do your level of analysis that you need, but also helping to do kind of do from concept to implementation. So really thinking about how we provide these tools, not only for within our transit agency, but how they engage their external stakeholders and partners to be able to make better decisions and be able to get more vested interest on what the services are provided, and also in kind of investing in transit. So there's some great visualization tools in terms of just also maps and then public engagement. And so I think that's been some of the better tools that I've been trying to promote, that not only are you just going to be able doing data and crunching in numbers at your desk, but it's also a really great tool to be able to help engage and bridge that gap between people who may not be as familiar with transit planning to understand what they can do and how they can provide input to be able to best determine changes their kind of expansion of service. So talk about as planning and scheduling software. We are all very familiar with the number of different vendors and options in there, but I want to highlight in particular Remix is that it's meant to be a little bit more user-friendly. So for those of you who may not always be dealing with planning and scheduling software, or may not have an ArcGIS technician and staff, this is a great way to be able to get a little bit more access to something that's very similar. It allows you to be able to look at your transportation mobility challenges to do what we like to call in transportation planning scenario planning. So thinking about if you were to expand service to another county or if you were going to add new routes. Also, I talked a little bit about demographic analyses. So thinking a little bit more about the emphasis about environmental justice, Title VI, or civil rights, even kind of just job access or even those disadvantaged populations, trying to see where you might be able to improve your access and your reach when it comes to those type of populations. And then really exploring the combination of fixed route and on-demand transit. For many of you, you've engaged with me in conversations to explore a little bit about how you can look at different types of services within your systems, whether it would be fixed route alone, or if you're going to do a combination where you might explore some on-demand to be able to provide first mile, last mile connections, or to do complementary service to support underperforming fixed route service. Remix is really great to be able to explore that. And as we mentioned, this is web-based, so you don't have to download any special software, no hardware. You don't have to worry about whether or not you have the right kind of computers to support it. All you need is just to have a web browser and then a credential login that we authorize for you to be able to access the platform. And above all, you can create your projects. So I mentioned there's like at the most we saw about 295 active projects, but it allows you to be able to create these projects and also to share. And I'll have a little bit of some details about that in my presentation later. But it's real time, so you don't have to wait for someone to save the file, close out, and then be able to have someone else access it. You can kind of do it in a collaborative manner and be able to see if someone's recommending some changes or being able to provide some inputs and seeing how that acts in real time, which I think is great. And the other part is shareable graphics and visualizations. I know that we all don't have a robust background in Adobe or big marketing platforms. So this gives you some really useful kind of visualizations or images to be able to use, whether you're trying to do that internally or externally in promotion of your transit services. So I'm going to highlight a little bit about the experience of Remix. I probably will not do this justice as well as Josh or Seb can, but I think it's important to note that we're relying a lot on Remix in terms of their levels of engagement. We've just talked about North America in general, but they have been such a great partner in being able to understand exactly how we can use this, not only for us at DRPT, but to be able to help our transit agencies understand how this can be useful while we have this contract with them. So highlighting that they have a number of different clients, over 26 countries. It's wild to me to think about that in terms of the scale of what they all do. But I want to highlight in particular just about deployments. And so we are kind of one of the few state DOTs that have kind of a contract with Remix. A lot of them of assumptions is about really at a kind of transit agency level, but we've also been engaged with a lot of our peer state DOTs to talk about what's the best use cases. And so I thought it was great that we could highlight a little bit of other state DOTs as well that have some existing contracts and relationships with Remix in terms of using this platform. And they have different use cases, which I think is also great. So, in the future, I know there are opportunities that we can do peer exchanges and have a better understanding of how state DOTs can support transit agencies by having these type of contracts and these partnerships. Ooh, that went fast. So really quick, so kind of highlighting some quick visuals here. We talk a little bit about how this is a map-based tool. So you can draw your routes, your stops, polygons. I talk a lot about ArcGIS. And so as a transit planner or any kind of transportation planner, not everyone's going to have that active skill set. So this is going to be as easy as pointing and clicking in some ways. And I may be diminishing that a little bit, but that's maybe all you need to do. So if you have your existing network and you want to add a stop, it is very easy to be able to add those things in. Also, we mentioned a little bit about with Remix, so GTFS, our General Transit Feed Specification data. Remix is also a great platform to be able to edit your GTFS data. I know DRPT does have a GTFS database that we've done to help some of our agencies be able to maintain and update that data for you all, but Remix is also another platform, so it also can help communicate that information to other trip planning tools or wherever you may need it. So it's another option if you are exploring GTFS to be able to use Remix. And then I mentioned about public outreach and comments, and I know that sometimes it's not necessarily an association of thinking Remix, it's planning, but I have been exploring, especially with our partners at Remix, about how this can be used to be able to get public comment. So instead of the old days where you have, actually, as of last week, there's still static maps, dots, you're still drawing highlights of where you would like maps, even post-it notes. this is another way to be able to engage the public, whether they feel comfortable doing it in person. They could also go on the mobile application portion of it, collect comments on proposed routes or stops. And it's just another way to be able to get the public engaged on decision making that's involved with your service. And so I thought that was a really good use case to highlight here. And so again, just talking about Remix and the different uses, of course, there's transit planning and scheduling, on-demand planning and operations, the functionality of it. So if you want to really think about how you change some of your timetables, headways, and see those impacts, it has these assumptions that you can also modify to be able to explore what those kind of changes would do in terms of your overall cost, what it would do in terms of the number of vehicles you may need. And it helps you in some sort of kind of just scenario planning again about understanding the implications and the impacts of some of these decisions that you might want to make to your service. And also just day-to-day operations. I will be the first to say that I may not have the most experience in operations, but sometimes it may be helpful to have some visual tools to be able to help improve the efficiencies within your transit agency. So again, I encourage you to explore it. I am more familiar on the planning side, but I'm sure with the ops that there are some opportunities you can explore that under Remix. I gotta stop using my mouse. So I talked a little bit of some features with Remix. I already mentioned a little bit about public engagement. There's also ways to be able to communicate any kind of changes. So if you're planning a route change and you need to put it out for a public comment before implementing, there are some ways to be able to share those tools. I've already talked about GTFS, whether you can have that communicate the updates to your GTFS through, directly through your scheduling tools or trip planning apps, whether that's going to be Google Transit, Transit app, or so forth. Remix can help facilitate that. And then even if you have disruptions in your service, I think this is interesting to explore on our end is just how you can use Remix to be able to indicate some detours that may need to happen for your service. So I just want to, again, emphasize different uses that you can have outside of just the typical planning and scheduling. And then again, I wanted to provide this because I also thought it was great animation about how you can do some collaboration through Remix. So if you have multiple users at work and your people are working in a hybrid fashion, you can still be able to kind of collaborate and explore some changes that you may want to explore for your service. So, you want a fixed route that maybe would go through one of your microtransit zones. You can play around and see what that does. So I think Remix as a tool allows kind of a better way to help that workflow instead of just having back and forth email exchanges or being able to just, again, close and then reopen a GIS file to be able to see what those proposed changes would look like. I do mention that there are some options about adding data. We have also the opportunity to explore that. I know that I've engaged our Remix contacts about adding food deserts, about adding shared charging or electric charging stations. There are multiple possibilities, so don't feel constrained by what you may see when you go into Remix in terms of the available data layers. Always kind of ask about that. And if it's publicly available or available to be able to be added, we can be able to explore that to be able to, again, encourage you in terms of how you're looking at your analysis and your planning. And then also kind of, I think this point about community impact, it allows you in seconds to kind of see what that impact is, which allows you to really say, oh, let's not explore this, not even bring it up to, our board, or to really say that this is worthwhile. Let's go ahead and explore this and present it at our next meeting. Some other features that are related to Remix, I like to highlight Network Jane. And as a planner, I always talk about this. Josh is already smiling. That I love that they named Network Jane after Jane Jacobs. And I know that for a lot of you who have attended CTAV or VTA, we've talked about this, but I like this accessibility tool that they included in Remix. It allows you to look at the gaps in your service in terms of access to jobs, healthcare, and any other kind of key demographic points or kind of activity centers. It's a really great tool to understand exactly, what's your actual access to transit and how it's getting people to where they need to go. So definitely explore that functionality. And again, I've already talked about GTFS, public engagement, but the presentation studio, which I still am exploring, I think that it's helpful for those, again, who are used to going to Adobe, creating these lovely like high resolution maps, or even just making GIS maps. It's a great tool to be able to just share, create it as an image or a PDF, and then be able to integrate that into any of your kind of materials that you want to share or distribute to communicate changes, ideas, or just solicit feedback. So I think that's also just a really nice function that Remix has added for us. And then I will only have a little bit of time to really talk about on-demand planning. But this function in particular is something that I've encouraged a lot of our agencies to really play around with because I know there's a lot of investment when you're starting to introduce microtransit into your service, whether you do already demand response, whether you're looking at fixed route, whether you're even thinking about changing your services to microtransit. It's always great to be able to use this as an option to really think about those initial impacts as well as your readiness for you as a transit agency. So you can think about what are the service areas that make sense based off of your knowledge of your area or the interest that you may have from different localities or elected officials. It also is great to be able to explore if there's gaps or what we would think about transit deserts and thinking about how if you want the use case for microtransit to be to fill gaps between existing services. I've also seen this used in terms of planning to be able to do what kind of is like flex transit. So getting neighborhoods or areas that may not already have connections to get to existing fixed route stops so they can connect to the existing network. And then I've already mentioned first mile, last mile problems. So if you're needing to be able to have service to get people to, transit or just to even to the fixed route network that's outside of the realm of maybe the paratransit buffer, that's something you can explore through this profile. All of it is to say is that it's always a great tool to be able to explore first, to really understand whether or not you're ready and to get an idea of what you would want to explore when it comes to any kind of on-demand planning. I will say that there's also great discussions you can have with peers who've already launched a number of different microtransit pilots with DRPT as well as on their own. But this is always a good tool to be able to start first and say that, hey, I think that maybe these zones make sense based off the population or the number of car-free households or even those with disabilities. Maybe it's just noting where your existing services are based off the fixed route and just understanding that there's this gap here that maybe we can address with. So I encourage this first before you even think about doing feasibility studies or exploring what you would be piloting some new microtransit services here. And then as I kind of wrap up my part of this presentation, I want to make sure I kind of introduce use cases. So as a plug to continue your agencies to be engaged, to use Remix, sign up new users, just think about all the opportunities that you can start thinking about with Remix. So I've already talked a lot about route changes, redesigns, but also bus stop studies. I will also toot our horn a little bit about bus stop assessments. I know there's a lot of interest in terms of really thinking about how you prioritize where bus stops go, but also think about prioritizing what bus stops may need more amenities or improvements, even ADA compliance. Think about that with the using Remix. We've seen a number of our agencies look at equity and impact analysis. So if you really are trying to explore doing a Title VI analysis, or even thinking about disadvantaged populations and how to kind of think about what your services are doing to meet those needs for those populations, Remix is a great platform for that. I thought the detour planning and event planning was great too, because a lot of times we think that you have to be kind of dynamic, but if you know well in advance, if there's going to be a big concert or construction, it's great to be able to use Remix to be able to see how we're going to accommodate some of those changes in our kind of service in terms of access to roads or even kind of, congestion and commute patterns. And might be a great use for Remix here. And then again, microtransit mobility services and public engagement. So I think what I will end is that in terms of available resources and access, I'm going to throw Wood Hudson out there if you need to have access to sign up for our Remix through our contract. But you're also welcome to engage any of your DRPT contacts, whether it's program managers, planners, or any even bother Zach at this point. If you want to get access, please reach out to us and we can work with our Remix staff to get that signed up. And then there's a quick link to where you can go ahead and look at Remix. Remix itself does provide a lot of training resources and technical support. In addition to a knowledge hub that has both recordings of previous trainings, but in videos, there's also monthly trainings they provide. And then they also offer office hours. And so we used to have it last year customized to Virginia, but there's also opportunities to be able to engage with others outside of Virginia. So if you ever just want to feel free to listen in and maybe hear what other agencies may have questions or inquiries about, office hours are great, or you can always ask your questions if you feel comfortable enough. That's needless to say that you are always welcome to ask Josh in particular. If you have any technical questions, he's always very responsive and is willing to be able to work through some of the items. I also linked a little bit some more examples that Remix has provided on how you can use this. And I've already mentioned about how you can request assistance either through the Remix app directly. You can also access our contacts, which I have provided their emails at the next slide. But I also appreciate that Remix did a case study on WADA in terms of how they're using Remix in in kind of their service planning. So I think I have chatted quite a bit, but this is all of the emails that you can reach out to any of the respective staff that you might need to. And if there are any additional questions or follow-up that you may think of later, feel free just to send an email to myself, and I'll be glad to be able to connect with you all, just kind of help think through how you want to explore a remix. So I know that I went through that pretty quickly. So I think, Josh, we may have enough time. I've asked Josh to be able to kind of go through a live demonstration of Remix so you all have kind of a better idea of how it works. So Josh, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Absolutely. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. And for the purposes of this demonstration, I want you all to imagine you're in sunny Florida right now and are a planner at Palm Trans. This is Palm Beach County in Florida. And you see that we have this sort of lone fixed route in the north of the county. And if I click into the fixed route, I immediately get a lot of valuable information that's pulled from the GTFS, as well as other information that Remix is calculating. So you see here that it's a pretty low frequency route. It's running on weekdays every 60 minutes, Saturdays every 60 minutes, and there is no service on Sunday. But at a glance, I could see the important statistics about the route, how many people we're serving, how many employment opportunities, car-free households, one-car households, hospitals, schools, pharmacies. It's all here in a click, so we can understand the value of our service and who we are providing service to. Now, there's quite a number of people within this sort of West Jupiter or North Palm Beach area, just shy of 20,000. But again, they're being served by a fairly underperforming fixed route. So let's see what it would look like if we increased the frequency on the service. What would the impact be not only to our budget, but to our fleet as well? So I could quickly come here into the timetable on the top left, first noting that we're spending roughly $750,000 on this specific route. Come into the timetable, and I want you to keep an eye on the left over here. So you see throughout the day, we're running about 2 buses, but I could quickly come in here or even just edit the timetable directly and go over to frequency and say, okay, we want to run this every 30 minutes. We want to make this a much more frequent service and come here and edit the trips. And so instantaneously, Remix is updating not only the timetable to get a sense of the trips that we're serving, but also the number of vehicles that we need. So of course, we doubled the number of vehicles we need from 2 to 4. And if we take a look at the bottom left, the cost is also updated as well as the hours that we're providing service or service hours for this route. So this could be one option for improving accessibility to this area, but let's also weigh trade-offs, right? So in Virginia in particular, you're hearing a lot about microtransit, and Tiffany had referred to it as well. And oftentimes when we're thinking about microtransit, we're thinking about it against the backdrop of our larger fixed route network, right? Whether you're complementing fixed route, providing service where there is no fixed route service, or even replacing an underperforming fixed route. Well, with Remix, it's super easy to do this type of analysis in a matter of seconds. So I could come over to my little on-demand tool here on the left, and I can draw a zone. And it's simple. It's as simple as just a few clicks. So I'm just going to kind of roughly outline this area, making sure to overlap my fixed routes to the south so I can provide connection to the broader network. And I'm going to rename this scenario 1 because we could think about this as an iterative process in which we're tweaking the zone to match our budget. So again, instantaneously, Remix is going to calculate the ridership that we can expect to see, the amount of vehicles we would need at peak, the size of the zone, the cost, as well as these statistics. So while this zone is more expensive than the fixed route, we're actually encompassing quite a lot more in terms of population as well as employment. So these are trade-offs that Remix can provide data for. So you can weigh not only service quality considerations, but also ridership considerations and costs. So again, in contrast with our fixed route service, going back to that fixed route, the number 10. There we go. We were looking at 1.3 million to serve 20,000 people. And then with the microtransit service, we're looking at 3 million and 8 vehicles, but serving a much larger population of 61,000. There's a lot of other great functionality you could do here to get more fidelity and information about the fleet that would be necessary, as well as the associated cost. Tools like looking at different demand templates. So if we imagine this more of a commuter demand. And if you recall, the fixed route did not have any service on Sunday. So maybe you want to continue that and match service hours. So we could even remove this window entirely. And as you make these trade-offs, again, Remix is a dynamic platform, which is consistently and constantly updating. And you can see that the cost went down naturally as I removed that Sunday service. Lastly, I might want to look at it from the perspective of a rider. And Tiffany talked about this really great tool that we have called Jane, which allows you to do network level as well as point analysis to look at travel times within your network. So I could take Jane and I could drop her somewhere, maybe around the Jupiter Medical Center in the north of this zone. I'm just going to switch my map style to a simple map. And the cool thing about Jane is that she works with what's on the map and what you present her with. So if I go to scenario 1 and turn that off, this is before microtransit, right? So this is doubling the frequency on the number 10 route. And then I could turn on my microtransit zone, noting, let's say, the access to employment opportunities. So the amount of jobs that can be accessed within 15, 30, 45, and 60 minutes. And then I could turn on my on-demand zone. And now this is with on-demand factored in, or microtransit. And you can see both visually, but also quantifying, access has improved greatly. So again, this is just one of those other tools that allows you to see how changes you make to your network are not just going to affect your budget and bottom line, but also from the perspective of a rider and their ability to access your service area. There's a lot of other great tools. Just for the sake of time, I won't go into too much detail. But one that's quite important is this presentation studio here on the left, which allows you to make high resolution maps to put into PowerPoints, presentations, bring before the board, put into a TDP, put into a grant application. And just in a couple clicks, I can export this as a high resolution or even print ready export. And lastly, as we think about exploring ways that we could take this information, bring it to the public or bring it to stakeholders, Remix has a lot of great built-in tools that allow you to share with others outside of your agency. So perhaps I do this work and I now need to get the perspective of a program manager at DRPT or someone at my MPO, or maybe even just riders in a public engagement session. I could come in here to the top right corner and create a public-facing map. Remix will automatically generate a QR code, and then riders or public or stakeholders, whoever it might be, can actually come and comment on the map. And so I'm just going to end my little spiel here with a request for a little bit of participation for those on the call. If you could take out your phone, I am going to zoom into this QR code and just scan the QR code and put a comment somewhere on the map and could say, hey, hi, hello. And we're going to take a look at this feature. So I'll just give it about 30 seconds for people to scan the QR code and to comment accordingly. Okay. And so coming into my commenting tool over here, I can see a lot of comments coming in automatically, quite exciting to see. And Remix will delineate between those who are internal, so within your agency, and those that are external, outside of your agency, which here we're labeling as the public. And I can see Brent even associated with a specific route. And if I click any of the comments, these are geo-referenced, so they can be exported, but we could also see the specific stop or route that people are commenting on. And this is a tool that is widely used for things like redesigns, in which public solicitation is a stage within that process. But again, this could be work that you're doing with DRPT, an MPO, a peer agency to collaborate and really get more eyes on the project to fine tune your scenarios. Someone from GRTC commenting here. And there's functionality you can do to require emails or names or allow anonymous comments or even prevent people from commenting, but they could still view and interact with the project. And if you're still have the public view open, you can notice that as you click into the microtransit zone or you click one of the fixed routes, you will see information that you can set and about those specific services. I'm just going to post a comment of my own just to show you an example of an internal comment. But I could come in here and I could tag my my coworker Ben, a fellow planner, and say, "What do you think?" And then Ben could come here and reply and say, "I think this zone is too large." And with that feedback, I could then come in here, click into my zone, and begin to work on it.
Hey Josh, I also noticed there's the option, I think, to be able to download comments. Is that what that
Yep.
And there, I think that's also a good point to highlight there.
Yeah, everything within Remix is exportable. So that includes all the costing details, all the demographic data, the comments, the maps you create. We're trying to take, oh, this is actually quite cool. My colleague Ben Peabody has now entered the map. This is not planned. And you can see his cursor flying around. This is a feature that we are unveiling in November called multi-user editing, where Remix now acts as sort of a Google Doc, where you can have a single source of truth, where your colleagues come and can collaborate with you on a project. So cool to see him actually viewing the project. And it looks like he's just kind of flying around Palm Beach over here, taking it all in. So I'll pause there if there are any questions, either for Tiffany, Sev, or myself.
We do have a handful of questions. The first one is, what is the best way to become familiar with Remix, especially for those who are not necessarily steeped in the planning process?
So the best way to become familiar with Remix is to check out our Learning Hub. Our Learning Hub has live sessions, like a kind of like a Remix 101. We do them for both fixed route planning and microtransit planning, so you could do them in two parts. Just like this webinar, if you are unable to make it, just the fact that you register will give you a copy of that recording. You could also reach out to me for a specific project support. So for example, if you have a TDP coming up or Title VI analysis and need to know more about certain functionality, that's when I would step in to help with that. And we also have written and visual guides on the help site. We try to make everything as clear as possible, so that way the learning curve isn't too steep. And we typically think that joining one of our Learning Hub sessions, which is roughly an hour and a half, is a really strong foundation to be able to use the platform and to be dangerous with it.
The next question is, will it work with on-demand service?
Yeah, so this is a great tool not only to plan future microtransit service, but in addition, if you have microtransit data from a microtransit deployment, you can bring it in and you can optimize existing service. So especially for all those VIA microtransit customers out there, we have an automatic integration with VIA's microtransit data, which can bring in and visualize your trips in a very compelling way.
And the next three questions are kind of all under one umbrella, but I'll ask them somewhat independently. The first one is, how much effort is required to load data needed to start using Remix?
There is virtually no effort required. The reason why is Remix is based off of GTFS, and most GTFS data within the state of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia, is publicly available. So we have it already brought into the platform. If your GTFS needs to be updated, just send us a new file. It takes us roughly 5 minutes to update your GTFS and you're good to go. Now, if there's data beyond that that you want, perhaps you have a file with bus stop amenities or boardings and alightings, we have a self-service data portal where you can actually submit data and upload it yourself, very similar to adding files to GIS. That is not a necessary step. We just really need the GTFS as a foundation. And again, in almost every case, for every agency, we already have that within the platform.
And these ones are all somewhat related to data, but are the ridership forecasts based on each agency's ridership levels for comparable routes or other rules of thumb?
So we provide ridership estimates for our microtransit tool specifically, and that is actually taking into consideration localized data. So that's going to look at key demographic data like population, housing, income, socioeconomic data, and it's going to localize a larger model that we have. It gives you the ability also to view different scenarios. So you're not stuck just with that ridership prediction. If you have maybe data from a consultant or back of the envelope estimations of your own, you can manually input those into Remix and you can override Remix's ridership projection to look how that impacts the supply that you would need to serve that ridership.
Okay. And kind of building off of your answer a little bit, our next question is, where did the demographics and related information, i.e. households with no car, where do they come from?
Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen one more time just so I could show this as well as tell. But all of our data sources are listed over here under the data layers tab. Not only are we going to give you the source of the data, so as you can see here, like ACS data as an example, we'll bring you directly to it and we'll provide you a help site article that breaks down how we're taking in the data, the sources it's coming from, and any form of interpretation. If I go back to data layers, you can see that they're quite extensive. They range from demographics, grant-specific data layers, like areas of persistent poverty for raised grant applications, more demographic data. And if I scroll, there's infrastructure, land use, location of schools and hospitals and pharmacies and health facilities, commuting patterns, one-car households, car-free households, and it's all sourced. It's all linked here to wherever the source is. And so we're compiling the latest USDA data for things like location of supermarkets, the most recent census data, ACS data, and we even have some DRPT specific data sets as well that are coming from the state's data portal.
Excellent. And I'm assuming that the source of cost shown in the software come from the agencies themselves.
Yeah, so the source of the costing information is totally customizable as well. So if I click into a specific route, like this number one, we'll actually show you visually the math of how we are calculating that costing information. It's defaulting to $100 per vehicle hour, so it works off a per vehicle hour cost. Totally customizable, right? So we all know our per vehicle operating cost because it's a necessary reporting tool for the NTD. So just grab it from there, go into the settings, and you can actually come into the tool and you can override that cost. So you can come here and manage that. And you can add a different Saturday or Sunday cost if you factor that into your cost analysis. Some agencies factor in a per mile cost. Again, these are optional things that could bring in more fidelity. And you can even factor in per year capital costs as well if you allocate certain funds towards that.
Okay, excellent, thank you. And the final question is it possible to export microtransit data to newer GTFS Flex file type?
No, that is a feature that we are working on. So it is in our roadmap. Our platform does allow you to export more traditional GTFS, and we are constantly evolving that as well. So we now have the ability to do GTFS fares as an example, which more agencies are introducing to GTFS as a way to improve trip planning apps. So we do have an eye on GTFS Flex. I'm not sure the timeline for that, But again, it is something that we are aware of and working towards.
Thanks, Josh. And that was the last question. So if there are no others, give it a second. Tiffany, is there anything else for the good of the cause?
No, again, thank you, Danny and VTA, for again letting us take some time today to speak about Remix. I will be back in December to talk about modernizing transit fleets, which is our state zero, low, or low, no emissions resource guide that we have just wrapped up. So again, I hope you don't mind seeing me for another session. But a big thank you to Sev and Josh for joining me today, especially for Josh answering some of those more technical questions, which I may not have been able to do. But again, thank you all so much.
Thank you. Have a great day and have a great weekend.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.